Of It group. I'm Grace.
Hi, we're the In Control and Glad of It group. I'm Will.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I want to sleep.
I'm Grace.
So, let's start out by thinking back on our lives. Let's go back to middle school. In middle school, you didn't really get to pick anything. You didn't get to pick your classes, you didn't get to pick stuff that you were interested in. You barely even got to pick your friends, but in college, we get to pick everything. Everything is personalized. You get to pick your major, you get to pick your classes, your professors. You get to pick what you eat every single day. It's fun. And in college, you have a bigger sense of control. And that's where we talk about what is control. Control may look like a small psychological concept, but it may be the biggest influential factor on all of human behavior. See, we're not talking about to control the actions of others, but more of your personal power that control possesses over you in your own life and the events in it. This relates to everyone, yes, from the guy that sits in the back of class to the workaholic girl that panics when she gets an A-. Everyone is affected by the concepts of control and the influence that it has in their life. Now, adults prepare for death a little bit different than everyone else does because it's inevitable and they're closer to it. In chapter 19, the book discusses how some signs of deeper personality changes happen immediately before death, including more dependence and docility and less emotionality and assertiveness. Increased dependence in aging leads to our topic of how dependence intermingles with lack of control. When aging brings dependence and decisions are made for that person, the sense of control affects personality. When the elderly gets into nursing homes, they learn how to be helpless because of what's going on in their life. They have more health issues, which makes them more prone to be helped. They begin to suffer from a sense of powerlessness. This sense of no control is an underlying cause of depression. The emotion most commonly seen with the 5 stages of dying is depression. Our study shows us that emotional state can be positively affected if we allow more of a sense of control for the elderly patients. Just because you are old doesn't mean that you have to go around acting like it. No matter what stage you are at in your life, it is still your life. This study relates to the subject discussed today because many elderly individuals see a sudden loss of control later in life, and up until their death, this loss of control is against our very nature. Now, a question I want you guys to think about is, what would you do if you lost that control and it was taken away from you and you were unable to get it back? Would you like that? Yeah. A little bit of background about this study is when people who have been forced to give up their control and decision-making power, their attitudes tend to worsen compared to people that are given a greater sense of personal responsibility. Their lives and attitudes improve. This study predicted that patients who were given control would have better mental alertness. Based on previous literature and their own earlier studies, this predicted that patients who were given control should demonstrate improvements in mental alertness. I think I repeated that. Activity level, satisfaction with life, and other measures of behavior and attitude. And they also looked into the elevator study, which was a study that talked about how a person that was closer to a control panel was more likely to have less anxiety than a person that was far away from a control panel in an elevator. And that was a big part of the research. And this leads us to our research question. Does giving people more autonomy and freedom improve their lives, attitudes, and health?
Yeah, so now we're going to go into the methods. Yeah. Okay. of the actual research. So the participants in the study were generally similar in physical and psychological health, and then they also had similar socio-economic backgrounds. There was 91 participants, and they were ages 65 to 90. And then there's two groups, and one group is the increased responsibility group, and then the other group is going to be like the control comparison group. And the increased responsibility group had 8 men and 39 women, and the comparison group had 9 men and 35 women. So some equipment and material that were used. So there's the jelly bean guessing game, which was just a contest that was basically given to both of the groups, and it was just an option if you wanted to participate. And then there was a movie night, and that was also given to both of the groups, and there was just like different directions that came with the movie night and different like options. And then for the small plants, this is basically the administrator like went around and then offered plants to the both of the groups with different directions for each. And then the furniture, everybody can like move their furniture around in the nursing home, but for the increased responsibility group, he just like gave it more of like a highlighted option for them. And then so basically the administrator like approached both groups separately and had a message that was just like, we want you to be comfortable and pleasant in the home that you're living in. And so for the increased responsibility group, he highlighted again like how if you want to rearrange the furniture in your room, you can contact the nurse and they can rearrange it whatever way you want. And then with the plant opportunity, he gave them 2 decisions, whether they wanted the plant or not, and then also which plant they wanted. And then the increased responsibility group was also given control to take care of the plant themselves. Then the movie night for the increased responsibility group, he gave them 2 days if they wanted to go to it, and that just like gave them more control over which day they wanted to go to it. And then with the control group, which is usually like the less responsibility given, we see that he just didn't really re-highlight the ability to rearrange your furniture. And then during the plant opportunity, something else that like we read about was that the nurse literally just like gave them the plant. They didn't even like have really an option. So they're really not giving you a choice at all. And then the nurse is going to care for the plant, so they don't really get to like even care for it. And then the movie night, they were told that they would be scheduled what day they could attend the movie. So overall, the responsibility group, they were able to exercise more control over their environment. And then the comparison group, they were given a message that most of their decisions would be made for them. So how did they measure all of these things? Because, I mean, we're talking about hypothetical constructs, so we know that it's harder to measure those things. But they had 2 questionnaires, and the questionnaires were, there was one that was 1 week prior to the announcements that were made, so all of the like plant options and the movie options. And then there was another one offered 3 weeks after the announcements to try to see how the increased responsibility group kind of like adapted to it. So one questionnaire that was given to the residents, and it was it had questions on it about how much control they felt they had and how active and happy they were at their home. And then the other questionnaire was given to nurses on each floor, and the nurses were not aware at all of the research that was being conducted, so they were blind to the experiment. And then they asked the nurses to rate the patients on a 10-point scale for how happy, alert, dependent, sociable, and active they were, and about their sleeping and eating habits also. So also with the results that are coming next, we'll just like highlight in a graph this further, but basically there are 2 measures of the residents' actual behavior, and the records were kept of the attendance at the movie that was being shown and the next week. Also, there was a contest held for patients to see if they wanted to guess on how many jelly beans were in a large jar. If the residents wished to enter the contest, they simply wrote their guesses down on the slip of paper and then placed it in the box, and then they just recorded how many people participated in the contest. So we're going to repeat our research question. Does giving people more autonomy and freedom improve their lives, attitudes, and health? So the psychological constructs that we looked at in this study were basically your sense of control in your environment and how that relates to how active, happy, and alert you are in life. And so the nurses who were interviewed, they also had to keep track of how many times the patients were visiting other patients, how many times they were just visiting other people, talking to staff, or how many times they were watching staff. And that all kind of just relates to how alert and active they were. And then also I just put the 6 on the side from the prior questionnaire that the nurses were supposed to be keeping track of. Yep. And then, so basically, like, the participating in the movie and to see, like, how many people were in attendance, like, if with the contest of the jelly beans and also with the movie, they were just measuring alertness. Yeah, and basically just, like, highlighting that our psychological construct of interest, our sense of control, happiness, and alertness.
Hey there, everyone. We are going to talk about data now. Everyone's favorite topic. Now, across the board, you have significant differences between the increased responsibility group and the comparison group. From self-reported factors such as happiness, activity, to even the interviewers' ratings and nurses' reporting and kind of rating regarding overall improvement in time spent in social activities, everything is better compared to the control group. Now, there's one factor that looks kind of negative, but that's actually a good thing. It's kind of the watching staff activity. Now, why this is a good thing is that watching staff is just kind of, it's a passive activity. It's old woman Betty sitting in the corner drooling, her eyes slowly tracking a nurse across the room. You don't want that in your elderly patients. You want them talking. You want them being sociable. You want them talking to staff. You want them talking to other patients. Now, they expected to see that their lives would improve of the elderly and that data points would positively correlate with increased sociability, increased happiness, activity, and alertness. This is largely true. 93% of the experimental group, all but one subject, I'm assuming Betty, were considered improved, whereas only 21% of the comparison group, 6 subjects, showed really a positive change. This is very significant because personal power and control not only affect our happiness, but it also means that it can make us happier. But there are some limits to this concept. First of all, there are the number of factors in the study. What really is control? What is happiness? Is happiness just levels of serotonin in the brain? If that's so, do we just need to give old people a bunch of serotonin pills? I don't think so. That is a limiting factor because you can't establish the direct causal relationship because we don't fully understand the factors involved. There's also the problem with the amount of people with health problems and changes in health due to old age, which could unto themselves be kind of confounding factors. But the end result is the same. This changed the way we think about nursing because in every single category there was a positive improvement for the group who received more control. This is overwhelming evidence that a higher sense of control leads to improved attitudes for both the individual's feelings and for others even observing the patient.
Now we're going to talk about the discussion. Why is this all important? This study is essential for us to understand how to best care for the elderly and give them a simple option to easily improve their health with increased perceived sense of control over some aspect of their life. This is a landmark study because it clearly showed the relationship between increasing the control an elderly person feels improving their health, attitude, and overall life. It also shows us that help does not just mean to do things for other people. It shows that help means that we can give people things like autonomy and time. Some criticism. I do not think we need to take into account the ethnicity of people in the study. We learned how some cultures, for example, Asian background families, tend to enforce a more authoritarian parenting style. This leads to high levels of control by the parent towards the child. If this is the best style to use for this culture group, then less control makes them feel more part of society and would lead to better attitudes. If we would take this into consideration with what culture demands are for individuals, then the results could be different with changing expectations in different cultures. Additional research methods. The study spanned for 15.5 years. Participants consisted of many different races, and the ages varied from 25 to 96. Perceived control was assessed using a 4-point scale rating phrases like, I can just do about anything I really set my mind to, with 1 being strongly agree to 4 strongly disagree. Continuing with methods, health was assessed by a number of health conditions participants were diagnosed with from a list of 10 specific health conditions. Included 25 years or older, an average 54 years of age, and attained 11 years of education. 63% were women, 64% Caucasian, and 55% were married. Some results and limitations. The study said that they could not find a direct link between given sense of freedom and health of the patients. No evidence was found for effects of health for changes in perceived control in either age group, but it did not comment on how the perceived control for the elderly, 65 and above. They did improve their health over time, but it was not true for the midlife patients, 25 to 64 years. How is this important today? This research was important to see how the sense of control is related to health across more than just one age group of people. This study showed a wider range of age along with it being conducted over a fairly long amount of time, giving us more stability in results. The findings of the midlife age group not having much correlation between health and perceived control should prompt us to have better understanding as how elderly are functioning differently and reacting differently to a new sense of control. It also is important for example, if you want to become a teacher, on how you treat students. If you give them more a sense of freedom or control, they end up being more motivated and also have improved attitudes. And there's also a second study that gave evidence as to how children who have a greater sense of control will less likely be a smoker in their 30s, more likely to exercise regularly, and have a lower risk for obesity. This is important for the future of raising children if you want to give your child a great future. And conclusion. Aging is inevitable. We're all going to get old. We need to understand how control improves well-being while getting older so we don't fall into helplessness. Making sure we get put into a retirement home that respects us enough to give us freedom and make our own decisions, and being educated about how health and having a better sense of control can lead us to live longer and happier lives.
We go